I opened my eyes to a world that trembled with danger. The ground beneath me roared, trees shattered like fragile bones, and the sky burned a furious red, as if the heavens themselves were enraged. I could hear the footsteps of giants, not beasts but creatures like me, yet unlike me, stalking silently, hunting for blood. I ran, heart hammering, muscles screaming, yet something deep inside refused to let fear control me. I watched my tribe fall one by one, torn by claws, teeth, and betrayal. But I did not perish. No, I survived. And in that survival, I discovered a dark truth. The world does not reward the strongest, it rewards the cunning. That day, fire became my ally, revenge my purpose, and every step I took after was a promise whispered in the smoke. We would rise, we would fight back, and we would become more than they ever imagined. My name is Koro, and 2.4 million years ago, I walked a land that was alive with danger at every heartbeat. The forests were dark, endless, and filled with shadows that moved with hunger. Gigantic beasts roamed freely, their roars shaking the mountains, their claws carving fear into every living creature. Storms raged without mercy, rivers turned into walls of death, and fire was both a friend and a curse. I was not yet Homo sapiens. I was something older, harder, forged from struggle and blood. My tribe and I fought every day just to survive, yet survival was never enough. We wanted power, revenge, a way to strike back at the world that hunted us. I learned that the weak vanish and the clever endure. Every scar, every lost friend, every stolen meal was a lesson. From that chaos, from that raw brutality, the first whispers of humanity began to rise within me, shaping what I would become. I watched the sky darken with storm clouds as hunger gnawed at my stomach and my bones ached from exhaustion, knowing that every step I took could be my last. My tribe and I moved silently through the forests, every rustle in the leaves a threat, every shadow a potential killer. Food was scarce, and each hunt felt like a gamble against fate itself. Sometimes we returned with nothing but bruised bodies and aching hearts. Fire became our secret weapon, a fragile yet fierce shield against the cold and the predators that lurked in the night. But even fire could not protect us from the cunning and cruelty of other tribes who would take what we had fought so hard to earn. I remember watching friends who once laughed with me turn their faces with hatred. Driven by desperation, and I saw entire tribes burn in flames of revenge, their cries echoing through the valleys, marking the lessons that the world demanded of us. We learned to fight not only with weapons but with wit, to anticipate the movements of beasts and humans alike, to strike swiftly and vanish before they could strike back. Every injury, every scar on my skin was a story of survival, a warning that weakness meant death. That hesitation was unforgivable, and yet even as we endured, I began to notice a change within myself, a flicker of something that reached beyond mere survival. Fear became a teacher, and pain became a language I could understand, whispering secrets about strength, strategy, and the unforgiving laws of this land. I learned to read the patterns of nature, to sense the wind before the storm arrived, to hear the heartbeat of prey hidden in the underbrush, to follow tracks that spoke of life and death in the mud. Nights were the hardest, filled with shadows and the howls of distant predators, and sometimes I lay awake listening to the cries of the dying, questioning whether the lessons of survival were worth the cost. Yet I could not give up. The fire inside me burned brighter than the fear, a constant reminder that I must endure, that I must become something greater than the hunger and the chaos that surrounded me. As seasons passed, I witnessed the cycle of life and death repeat endlessly. Some fell, some adapted, and some learned to manipulate the world around them to their advantage. We began to fashion tools not only to hunt but to control, to defend, to extend our reach into places that had once been forbidden. I carved stones into sharp edges, and my hands grew calloused, my mind sharper, understanding that survival was not merely a physical struggle, but a battle of intelligence, foresight, and instinct. The whispers of revenge lingered in my thoughts, fueling every decision, every risk I took to protect my people, to seize food, to reclaim territory, to assert that we were not merely victims, but warriors capable of shaping our destiny. At times, despair threatened to swallow me, yet in the darkness I discovered resilience I did not know existed. I learned to endure hunger, cold, and pain as if each trial was molding me into something new, something necessary for the future that would unfold long after I was gone. Every encounter with predators, every clash with rival tribes, Every narrow escape reinforced a lesson I carried deep within my heart. The world was relentless. But we were relentless too, and only those who adapted, who evolved their thinking and their actions, would survive to tell the story. Slowly, the struggle carved intelligence into our minds, patience into our hearts, and cunning into our spirits. We began to understand that brute strength alone could not secure life. That strategy, observation, and anticipation were as crucial as muscle and courage. I remember a day when I trapped a creature far larger than myself, using not only the sharpness of stone but the knowledge of its habits, its fear, and its hunger. And the triumph was intoxicating. I realized then that power came not from dominance alone but from understanding, foresight, and the cleverness to exploit every weakness. Nights by the fire became more than warmth. They were our school, our counsel, our place to reflect and plan, to teach the young to survive and to remind ourselves that the world did not forgive mistakes. The lessons were cruel but effective. When a storm destroyed our shelter, we learned to build stronger. When a rival tribe ambushed us, we learned to fight smarter. When prey vanished, we learned patience. Every moment of loss, every narrow escape, every triumphant hunt added to a collective knowledge that felt like a growing consciousness within our tribe, shaping us into beings who could see beyond the immediate struggle, who could anticipate, adapt, and manipulate the world, rather than being manipulated by it. I came to understand that survival was more than living day to day. It was a relentless shaping of the mind, a war against not only the dangers outside but the fear and doubt within. And each choice carried weight. Each failure taught something essential, and each victory was a testament to endurance, cunning, and the quiet fire of determination that refused to be extinguished. I watched the world shape me, and in turn, I shaped the world, carving out space for my tribe, fighting for every morsel, defending every life, and learning the merciless yet intricate dance of predator and prey, of rival and ally, of death and life. And in the depths of that struggle, I realized that we were not merely surviving, we were evolving, each scar, each lesson, each calculated risk forging the mind and spirit of what we would one day become. And through hunger, fire, and relentless danger, I understood the first taste of human resilience, ingenuity, and the unspoken promise that no matter how brutal the world, we would endure, adapt, and rise beyond it. One night, as exhaustion weighed heavily on my bones and the wind whispered through the trees like a warning, I sat alone while my tribe slept fitfully, and my eyes caught a glimmer, a tiny flash between my fingers as I struck two stones together almost absent-mindedly, and suddenly a spark leapt, dancing and flickering before dying in the darkness. But I persisted, struck them again and again until the spark grew into a stubborn flame, a small fire that trembled in my hands yet demanded attention. And I realized in that instant that this fragile creation was more than heat or light. It was power. It was vengeance against a world that had tried to crush us, against beasts that hunted without mercy, against rival tribes that would take everything from us if we let fear rule. And I felt a thrill unlike any other, a surge of control and purpose that made my heart pound with triumph. For in that moment we were no longer helpless creatures running from fate. We were wielders of creation, and the night itself seemed to bow to our determination. The stars above flickering as if acknowledging a shift in the balance of the world, and I gathered dry leaves and twigs, coaxing the flame to grow, careful yet daring, feeling the warmth not only on my skin but deep inside me, igniting a hunger for knowledge and mastery that could never be extinguished. And when I showed the fire to the others at dawn, fear and awe mingled in their eyes, their hesitation melting into wonder as they realized that with this new tool, we could hunt more safely. We could ward off predators. We could signal across valleys. And we could transform the land around us rather than be transformed by it. And I felt a surge of pride in something darker, a promise of revenge and supremacy. For the fire was not just warmth, it was a weapon, a shield, a declaration that we were no longer prey but challengers, that we could take what nature demanded of us with courage and intelligence. And with that spark, my mind raced with possibilities, imagining traps, ways to store food, ways to protect the tribe, ways to extend our influence beyond the forest and the rivers and the hunting grounds we knew. And slowly I began teaching the younger ones how to coax the flame, how to respect it, how to use it to assert control over the forces that had long terrified us, seeing in their eyes the same fire of determination that burned in me, knowing that this knowledge would travel with them and survive even when my body did not. And each night I practiced, Each dawn I reflected, learning the limits of this new power, understanding that fire could heal as easily as it could destroy, that control required patience, observation, and instinct, and that intelligence was no longer a luxury but a necessity for survival, for dominance and for legacy. And with every flicker, every smoke trail, every ember, I felt the first stirrings of what it meant to think beyond instinct, to plan beyond the immediate, to imagine a future where we were not simply reacting, but shaping, carving paths with strategy and foresight. And I realized that this was only the beginning, that the spark in my hands was the seed of something far greater than any hunt, any battle, any narrow escape, for intelligence would become our weapon, our identity, and our salvation. And the thrill of understanding this, the intoxicating sensation of seeing the world bend slightly to our will, filled me with a reckless courage, and I experimented, placing pieces of meat near flames to see how animals reacted, building small traps to test their curiosity, observing their movements, analyzing, learning, and teaching. And every success and every failure etched lessons into my mind, sharpening thought as sharp as the stones we once used to strike fire. And slowly the fire became more than survival. It became storytelling, a gathering point, a school, a crucible where our minds strengthened as our bodies had, where strategy and intuition merged into cunning and foresight, where I could see the tribe learning to think not only about hunger, but about planning, protection, and influence. And the fire taught patience, persistence, and the power of knowledge, and it whispered promises of revenge against the world that had hunted us, against the fear that had once paralyzed us, against fate itself. And I began to realize that survival alone was not enough, that to endure we must create, we must think, we must anticipate, we must become cleverer than every predator, more cunning than every rival, more enduring than every storm. And as I watched the flames flicker against the night sky, I understood that this moment, fragile and fiery, was the turning point, the moment we claimed a fragment of control over our destiny, the first taste of what it would mean to be truly human, to rise not just by strength but by intelligence, to take revenge not with teeth or claws but with knowledge, foresight, and creativity. And in that single spark, in the trembling glow that illuminated our faces in the darkness, I saw the birth of a power that would define generations. A weapon far sharper than any stone, sharper than any tooth, a power that would survive beyond the fleeting lives of those who wielded it. And I knew that from that spark, from that night, we were no longer mere survivors. We were thinkers, creators, strategists, and the first whisper of humanity had finally emerged, fierce, relentless, and unyielding. The fire I had coaxed to life had changed everything, yet even as it warmed our hands and gave us courage, I knew the world was not ours alone. Shadows moved among the trees that were not mine to command, and sounds echoed that did not belong to beasts I had ever hunted. And one evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, I saw them for the first time, creatures like me, yet different, taller in some ways, broader in shoulders, swifter in movement, their eyes sharp and calculating, their presence commanding a strange authority over the land we had thought ours. And fear twisted with fascination as I realized that survival would no longer depend solely on strength or cunning against wild beasts, but on our ability to contend with our own kind who were strangers, rivals, and teachers all at once. And we clashed with them first in skirmishes over water, then in fierce fights over territory, each encounter leaving scars not only on our bodies but on our understanding, for we watched them and learned their strategies, their ways of communicating silently, their clever traps, their alliances that formed and broke like shifting storms, and some of them vanished as suddenly as they appeared, leaving only whispers of bones and shadows, while others lingered, mingled with us, teaching and confusing in equal measure. And I realized that adaptation was no longer optional, that hesitation could mean death, and that evolution was not a gentle blessing, but a relentless war, shaping every sinew, every instinct, every thought. And the lessons were harsh. When they struck with superior speed, we learned to anticipate. When they hunted with intelligence, we devised deception. When they retreated, we observed and followed silently, gathering knowledge with the patience that only desperation could inspire. And nights were spent huddled around fire, comparing wounds, telling stories in whispers, tracing patterns in the stars, and understanding that our greatest battles were not against the elements but against those who shared our shape, our instincts and our hunger. And each encounter sharpened our minds as much as it tested our bodies, forcing us to think in ways I had never imagined, to strategize for survival and dominance, to read the intentions behind every gesture, every sound, every glint of eyes in the dark, and slowly, the line between predator and prey blurred. For sometimes we were hunters, sometimes hunted, and every shift demanded swifter reflexes and deeper cunning. And I learned to trust my senses beyond instinct, to weigh danger against opportunity, to anticipate treachery as surely as I anticipated the movement of deer through the underbrush. And with every victory came pride, yet tempered with humility, for a single mistake could erase generations. A single miscalculation could turn fire into ash and leave my people vulnerable to forces I could neither control nor predict. And as seasons passed, I noticed how our tribe changed, how our faces, our postures, our strategies reflected the trials we endured, how we became more agile, more aware, more patient, and more ruthless when necessary. And I saw similar changes in those who allied with us or opposed us, realizing that survival was a shared crucible, a competition where only the adaptable endured, and every day was a lesson in anticipation. Every night a reflection on every scar and every life lost, every fire we nurtured, every trap we set, every maneuver we executed, and I felt the weight of this unending struggle pressing on my mind, shaping my thoughts, my instincts, my very identity. And the fire of revenge and resilience that had driven me to master the flame now fueled my understanding that we were participants in an evolutionary war, a conflict that demanded not only courage and strength but intelligence, cunning, and an almost preternatural perception of the world. And I realized that every action, every choice, every step forward was a move in this endless chess game with existence itself, where the stakes were life and death, dominance and survival, legacy and oblivion. And I vowed silently that we would endure, that we would learn from every opponent, every encounter, every failure, and every fleeting victory, that we would not simply survive but thrive, that the world would bend to our ingenuity as it had to our resilience. And I understood finally, as I watched the fire flicker against the night sky, the silhouettes of my tribe and the unknown others moving like shadows in the darkness, that evolution was not a gift offered freely. It was a war that demanded everything, demanded that we observe, adapt, conquer, and endure. And through every clash, every stolen advantage, every careful observation, I felt the first profound awareness of what it meant to be truly human, to struggle not only against nature but against those like me, to learn, to teach, to evolve under pressure, and to know that only through relentless adaptation could we claim even a fragment of control over the unforgiving world that shaped us. And in that understanding, fear transformed into determination, despair into ingenuity, and the spark that had first danced between two stones became a symbol of not only survival, but intelligence, strategy, and the promise that through cunning, resilience, and unyielding will, we would endure and define our place among all creatures, a place not granted but seized through every calculated step, every thoughtful strike, and every moment of quiet reflection in the shadow of a changing, dangerous, and merciless world. The battles, the hunts, the fire, and the clashes had carved us into creatures capable of more than instinct, and as centuries passed, I watched our hands transform from tools of survival into instruments of creation, shaping not just stone and wood, but ideas, dreams, and futures. And the world around us shifted as we shifted with it, building shelters that could withstand storms, crafting tools that extended our reach, and in the quiet moments by firelight, I began to see the spark of imagination flicker in the eyes of the young, in the gestures of my tribe, in the silent pauses before action, and I realized that we were no longer reacting to the world but shaping it, that our minds had grown faster than our hands, capable of planning beyond a single hunt or a single battle, and we began to leave marks of our existence in the walls of caves, intricate patterns and images that told stories of hunts, of predators, of victories, of losses, a language beyond words that connected us across time. And each story painted was a testament to memory, emotion, and understanding. For we began to mourn those who fell in fire or claw or hunger, to honor their lives not merely as a ritual, but as a recognition that our consciousness extended beyond the individual, that we were linked through shared experience. And in these moments I felt something profound awaken within me, a sense of purpose that went beyond survival, a realization that life was not only a struggle to endure, but a chance to leave a mark, to create meaning. And the fire that had once been a weapon became a storyteller, illuminating our faces, our gestures, our expressions. And I spoke to the flames in whispers, recounting battles, dreams, and hopes, teaching the young to listen to the world and to themselves, to understand not only the dangers that lay in wait, but the beauty that persisted despite chaos. And slowly our minds learned patience and foresight, the ability to imagine not only the immediate next step but the possibilities that stretched beyond the horizon. And as I watched my hands mold clay and carve symbols into stone, I understood that intelligence had become our greatest tool, capable of shaping thought. Society and destiny and emotion deepened, not as weakness but as power, connecting us, guiding choices, informing strategy, and fostering empathy alongside cunning, creating bonds that made us stronger than any solitary strength and memory. Once only a record of survival, became a canvas for planning, storytelling, and teaching, storing lessons from countless encounters with predators, rivals, storms, and hunger, transforming experience into wisdom that could be passed through generations. And purpose emerged as the invisible thread weaving all these elements together, a drive not just to endure but to understand, to anticipate, to create, and to transcend the limitations imposed by the world around us. And in the stillness of night, surrounded by shadows dancing on cave walls, I realized that we were no longer merely surviving, that our lives were no longer dictated solely by danger or instinct, but that we were beginning to live, to shape our environment, our thoughts and our stories, to leave behind more than footprints and scars, to leave knowledge, memory, and dreams. And the realization struck me with both awe and responsibility, for living demanded more than breathing and movement. It demanded awareness, reflection, and the courage to act with intention. And I felt the collective heartbeat of my tribe, young and old, learning, creating, laughing, mourning, strategizing, dreaming. And I understood that this turning point was the birth of humanity, the moment when survival evolved into culture, when instinct was complemented by imagination, when thought could guide action, when memory could preserve identity, when emotion could unite and instruct. And I saw that every painted wall, every story told by fire, every tool crafted with care, every bond forged through shared struggle, was a step into a new existence, a life that transcended mere reaction and embraced creation. And I knew that we were becoming more than creatures shaped by nature, that we were now shaping ourselves and the world with intelligence, emotion, memory, and purpose. And in that profound transformation, I felt the first true sense of humanity, a fragile, fierce, and magnificent awakening that whispered through our bones and minds, promising that we were no longer simply surviving. We were living fully, deliberately, and irrevocably. I am no longer here, yet my pulse echoes in your veins. My fire still flickers in the courage that drives you. And every scar, every battle, every stolen meal, every whispered plan of survival lives on in you. I walked through shadows that would have swallowed us whole, faced beasts and rival tribes, endured hunger, storms, and the cruelty of a world that spared none. And in each trial, I planted a spark of defiance, a seed of cunning and strength that grew beyond my lifetime. You are the legacy of every choice I made, every lesson I endured, every moment I refused to yield to fear. And in your heartbeat, I see the triumph of endurance, the revenge against extinction, the proof that the struggle was never in vain. 2.4 million years ago, my journey began, and through fire, blood, and determination, it has led to you, the living witness of my story, the proof that we endured, adapted, and conquered time itself.